Hello there, and welcome back to Getting Started with C++ Programming. My name is Richard Snyder, and this is Section 2, Variables. In this section, we're going to be taking a look at what is a variable, what are the different types, how to initialize and use variables in a Hello World program. Also, how do we use variables to create a calculator program with different types of precision. In this video, we'll be talking about what is a variable and what are the different types. We'll be able to define what a variable is, define a character, define an integer, a float, a Boolean, and a more complex variable or object called a string. First, what is a variable? You as a programmer or starting off to be a programmer, when you make a program, you want to be able to take information and store it in memory. Once it's stored, you want to be able to access or manipulate it later on throughout your program. This is where a variable comes in handy. A variable is what developers can use to store the data in memory, but you can store it as different types. Data isn't necessarily all the same type, and you may be asking yourself, what is a type? Well, think about it. When you're talking with someone and you, let's say, use the word hello, H-E-L-L-O, that's characters. Those are specifically alpha characters. There aren't any numbers in there. There aren't any special characters. That is a specific type of a variable. Our first type of variable we're going to be discussing is a character. In the code, it's defined by char. As you can see in the example line, char C is equal to A. You're defining a character variable named C of character or char type, and you're setting it equal to the single character of A. A character, or char, is a data type or primitive of exactly 1 byte. It's not much more complex other than that. You can very simply store a single character in memory. This can be alpha. This can be numeric if you'd like, but you need to surround it with quotes. Or it can be a special character, like a question mark or equal. Now, when you're storing it, look at the example. Notice that there are single quotes. Usually when storing characters, single quotes are common practice that are used, and this will help with the storage process. An integer. Now we're getting into numbers. An integer in the code is defined by int. This stores a whole number. That means it is a number that does not have any precision or decimal points. If you try to store something with additional precision or decimal points, it'll probably throw an error or it will round it. Now, there are different types of integers, and this is based off of your storage needs. There's more information on the different types of integers at the link below. Suffice it to say, there's an integer, there's a word, there's a long, and there's a short. Each one has different storage spaces in memory. For our usage, we only need to use integer. We're not going to be going more complex or larger than integer. But I do suggest to read up on the additional topics just because they're very interesting and they're useful to know when you need to store large numbers or even small numbers. If you take a look at the example, you see int I is equal to 1. Notice how the 1 is not surrounded by any type of quotation. That's because it is a numeric character. It's numeric. The compiler will know to store the value of 1. You are creating a variable of I of integer type, setting it equal to 1. Let's go on to doubles, or floats actually, floating point precision, or it's really actually called floating point arithmetic. Floating point arithmetic or floats are defined in the code by float. This allows for the storage of decimal points, or more precision. Precision is pretty much how many decimal points you want to use. 0.0, 0.01, 0.001, 0.0001. Can go very far, up to, for floats, 32 bits. If you want to be more precise, you can also utilize something called a double, which is a precision of 64 bits. But again, for our application, we don't need to be that precise with 64 bits. We're not going to be using that much. I do suggest to read up at the link below, which contains more information with the difference between floating point arithmetic versus double. It's very interesting to read up a bit more about it. But again, for our discussion point and this application, this basic introductory to C++ programming, we're only going to be doing floats. As you can see in the example, we're creating a variable named f of float type, and we're setting it equal to 1.0. Again, notice no quotations, no single quotations, just 1.0. You can set it to 1 if you wanted to, with no decimal, and it would still define as 1.0. But you could also set it to 1.1, 1.2, 2.456, decimal points with additional precision, and that will be saved and shown and used later on with that type of precision. Booleans, defined in code by bool. These are logical values of true and false, 1 or 0. Very simple to go A or B. Not really A or B, but true or false, yes or no. Heavily utilized in conditional statement, if statement, which we will cover more in depth later in this application. If you'd like more information, please take a look at the link below. But Booleans are really useful in your program when you're trying to decide between which path to go. Programs can go different paths based off user input or data or variable manipulation. Booleans are very good ways to quickly say yes or no, true or false, dependent on information that's presented in the code. As you can see in the example, we're defining a variable named b of bool or Boolean type, and we're just setting it to true. Again, take a look at, there's no quotes around it, there's no single or double, it's just set to true. Strings. Strings are defined in the code by string. Now, this is not a primitive type. String is actually a class. We'll define a class a little bit more in depth later on in this course. But what you need to understand about a string is that the class allows for users to manipulate a grouping of characters. So for instance, with the word hello, as you can see the example, you create a variable named s of string type equal to hello with the double quotes around it. The string object or class allows for you to store each one of those characters concatenated together or grouped together, and allows for you to access them later on as that grouping. You do not need to store them individually, group them together, and add them or concatenate them together in a character array. This class takes care of it for you. It's very useful. You can also concatenate strings together later on in your application. You can get the length of strings. You can do a wide variety of substitutions with strings. You can do a lot of different things because of this class, and strings are heavily utilized. As you can see, the sample as a character array. Now again, arrays we will go over later on in this course, but an array is a grouping of objects or characters or integers. A character array, char s, as in create a character array s, an array is denoted by that bracket. And the 5 means you need 5 places in memory to store. You can see that's equal to the squiggly bracket, HELLO, each with single quotes, each with denominated with a comma. The single quote is saying that's a single character, and a comma is the next place in that array. Now, this is really complex to initialize, as you notice, and also to manipulate it, it becomes a little bit annoying and tedious. And this is where the advantage of just stating string s is equal to hello, and then you can do anything you need to with utilizing the class of string.